Welcome back. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Today I want to talk about a question that I got from a subscriber, and it's a question that I get asked all of the time. And it has to do with swim jigs. And before I get into it, if you are not a subscriber, please, guys, hit that subscribe button. I can use all of the subscribers that I can get. For those of you that are already subscribed, thank you very much. And for those of you that enjoy watching my videos, I appreciate it very much. And to get back into our question today, it has to do with swim jigs. And a lot of you know that I'm a very big fan of using swim jigs, specifically the Dirty Jigs Swim Jig. And that's the Finesse Swim Jig, the regular swim jig, as well as the No-Jack Swim Jig. And the question that I get is, when do you throw the Finesse, the regular, or the No-Jack Swim Jig? And it's kind of a hot topic button too. I feel like it really varies based on where you go around the country. But if you're way down south, they only throw the No-Jack. If you're kind of up north here, the Finesse is much more used. And to me, it's not about regions. It's about kind of what your fishing scenario is. So just real quick, I've got all three here, and I just want to show you the three, just so we know what we're talking about. It's a little bit hard for you to see, but you can tell the Finesse Swim Jig, it's a little lighter wire hook. This is a 4/0 hook, and it's got it's a 50 strand skirt, but it's half cut, so you can see it's cut underneath the collar. And I really like that because it's much more of a finesse presentation, and I'll get into when I use that. This hematoma colored one is just the regular Dirty Jigs Swim Jig, and you can see it's got a 5/0 hook. It's a three times strong hook, super stout hook. I mean, it's a great hook to begin with. It's got a 50 strand skirt, but it's got the full skirt. It's not cut off at all. And then the No-Jack is very similar to the regular swim jig, only it's got what I believe is a 5 times hook, 5 times strong hook, and it's a little bit bigger in diameter, but in general it's still the same 5/0 size. I mean, you can see they're basically comparable, but this one is just a little bit thicker of a hook. So for me, it really varies on what I'm fishing for and what my what cover I'm fishing that day. So I'm going to start with the Finesse. The Finesse Swim Jig, for me, is all about fishing for spotted bass and smallmouth. And the reason for that is it's much more compact, right? So the hook is smaller, it's got a little lighter weed guard. And when you compare it, you can see that it is, significantly smaller in size. And that's kind of tough for you guys to see, but I think it's really important when you're fishing for smallmouth and spotted bass, because they like to come up and nip at the bait. They're not always like coming up and just engulfing it. A lot of times they'll hit the bait 1, 2, 3 times before you hook up. And in my opinion, that smaller hook is easier for them to get in their mouth, which leads to more hookups. And so if I'm fishing smallmouth or fishing spotted bass, I almost always will go to the Finesse. And there's also a couple caveats with that too. So if I'm fishing for either of those species, the majority of the time I'm fishing clear water, and I like this swim jig because it is more streamlined, it's more compact, and it doesn't have as big of a skirt. So to me, it's more of a natural presentation, and it's more finesse, hence the name Finesse. And because of that, I think it's a good clear water bait, and a lot of times in clear water, I'm fishing spotted bass and smallmouth. I almost always will fish this with a boot tail swim bait, like the 3.3 Power Swimmer. That's kind of my go-to on it. But I'm almost always fishing it with a boot tail swimmer on it, just because at that point it's more of a minnow presentation, and that's almost always what I'm trying to mimic when I'm throwing the Finesse style. It's one of those baits. A lot of people down south will be like, oh, the hook's not big enough, or it's not strong enough. I can assure you, I mean, this hook is every bit stout. It's not a light wire hook. I mean, it's a good stiff hook. And I've caught lots and lots of very large fish on it. So it's more about the presentation than just the hook. And I think that's one thing a lot of people overlook when talking about swim jigs is all they want to know is the hook strength. And to me, that's not what it's all about. It's really the whole bait presentation, you know, as a whole. And I think a lot of times that's because people are only fishing it for one type of cover. So if we upgrade a little bit here to the regular swim jig, this is kind of my all-around go-to. It's in my opinion, it's the best of, you know, everything. It's still you can still use it in the finesse presentations. You can still throw it for big fish. It's got a super stout hook. It's got a big hook for those of you that like, you know, a large hook and fishing down south. I very rarely ever have any issues with this hook bending out on me. And if it is, it's because I'm basically stuck on like a tree trying to pull the tree back to the boat. But this is kind of my go-to when I'm fishing largemouth. If I'm fishing any water that's somewhat off-colored, I definitely will throw the regular swim jig. And I'll throw this on everything from 15-pound fluorocarbon up to, you know, a 50-pound braided line. I usually stick to fluorocarbon. If I can throw fluorocarbon, I generally throw fluorocarbon over braid. I just think you get more bites, but that's a whole nother video if we want to talk about that. So with this, the regular swim jig, I'll throw a variety of trailers. I really like the Berkeley Deal. That's one of my absolute favorites right now. I'll throw it with chunk style baits if I want to keep the bait kind of rising to the top, and then I still will throw it with a boot tail swimmer at the same time if I want to get more of that minnow presentation. And across the board with all of my swim jigs, my standard size is a 3/8 ounce. I will fluctuate up and down a little bit, but I feel like the 3/8 ounce is the perfect size. And, you know, so going back to the regular swim jig here, this is just like the perfect all around. You can fish this in heavy cover. You can still fish it in open water, and you're not going to have any troubles, you know, hooking fish or catching fish with it. I mean, I love the regular one. But for those of you who are down south and, you know, really are all about using 65-pound braid and fishing the heaviest cover and think you need the biggest hooks out there, they offer the No-Jack Swim Jig. Now this is, like I mentioned before, I believe it's a 5 times strong hook. It's a 5/0 hook. And this thing is an absolute beast. I mean, I literally can't get this thing to flex. I mean, it's ridiculous. So for me, it's a little bit of overkill, but there are times when I do like to throw the No-Jack. And it's almost always centered around fishing the heaviest of cover. So a lot of times it's specifically Florida. In Florida, you know, the fish are bigger, but the cover is bigger. You know, you go fish round reeds, you've got cattails, you've got hydrilla, you've got super heavy duty pad fields, you got hyacinth. Everything is big and tough. And, you know, when you get stuck, you usually get stuck. I mean, it's not like you can just pull the bait out. So if you're consistently in that heavy cover, where, you know, you're putting a lot of pressure on the line and the bait, I can see going with the No-Jack. And at the same time, you have the chance to tangle with an 8 to 10 pound bass, you know, on any cast when you're in Florida. And when you are wrestling big fish like that, you do want super stout hooks. So for me, the No-Jack is really a bait that I throw when I'm fishing a big bass fishery, as well as a fishery that is just super heavy cover. You know, so that could be Florida. If I go to Sam Rayburn, you know, and you're fishing some of the pads and the super heavy hydrilla there, you know, and you got giant bass, this is definitely a bait that I'll throw at the same time. But I would also recommend, if you're throwing the No-Jack, I would not throw it on fluorocarbon unless you're throwing a super heavy fluorocarbon. It's made to be thrown on braid, just because you are dealing with a hook that's super stout. It is a little bit thicker. You need to be able to drive this home versus, you know, let's say the Finesse. And that's one, going back to the Finesse, that's one thing I like about using it with spotted bass and smallmouth. You know, they've got pretty hard mouths, and this little hook I feel like is easier to penetrate than, say, if you were throwing the No-Jack on a smallmouth or a spotted bass. But if you're throwing this big, heavy No-Jack Swim Jig, you definitely need braided line to be able to drive that hook home. So, you know, again, when it comes to trailers on this is very similar to the regular swim jig. You can throw basically whatever trailer you really like, from a boot tail swimmer to a chunk style trailer to a Berkeley deal or whatever it is. You can pretty much throw everything. And yeah, so I mean, that's how I break it down. I feel like there's a very clear time and place to throw all three of these. You just have to kind of figure out what works best for you. They all catch fish, that's for sure. And I don't know that, you know, you're going to limit yourself from catching fish if you're throwing the No-Jack in a situation where I think that the Finesse would be better. I think it really comes down to your hooking percentages are a little different if you're not throwing the right hook in those situations. So guys, you know, I hope that helps. Like I said, I get asked this question all the time, and it's a pretty valid question. I mean, it really is. They're made for specific reasons, and you know, those are the reasons why I use them. Doesn't necessarily mean you guys won't disagree. And in fact, if you do disagree, leave a comment. Let me know. And if you enjoyed the video, hit that like button. And tune in, guys. We got new videos coming out every day. So thanks for watching.